The landing bay of Ankara Prime buzzed with the usual activity expected at the Galactic Consortium's most elite training facility. Ships of every shape and size hissed as they powered down, their hulls shimmering under the artificial light that simulated a neutral multi-species sky. A platoon of fresh recruits stumbled off the latest transport, most of them visibly struggling against the planet's unforgiving conditions. The gravity here was set to 1.5 times galactic standard, and the atmosphere, though breathable, required an advanced respiratory system or significant acclimatization for many species. Among the recruits, Riley Trent moved with a casual ease that set her apart. Her combat boots crunched against the metallic ground as she glanced around, taking in the imposing spires of black alloy and the distant hum of high-energy weapons testing. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag and suppressed a grin. If the consortium wanted to see what a human could do, she wasn't about to disappoint. Nearby, Sergeant Garvax observed the new arrivals. The towering Vritic had been through decades of battle across the galaxy, his scarred chitin armor a testament to his experience. He loomed over most species with his 4 thick limbs and a wide barrel-shaped torso. His multifaceted eyes scanned the recruits, assessing them with clinical efficiency. He noted the trembling of a Corvan whose legs buckled under the gravity and the uneasy twitching of a Luminar recruit as their translucent skin adjusted to the environmental changes. Then his gaze fell on the human. She didn't just stand out, she didn't even seem affected by the conditions. Her relaxed stride and curious gaze weren't just unusual, they were downright unsettling. Humans were a relatively new addition to the consortium, but their reputation as Deathworlders had already preceded them. They came from a planet classified as Category 9 on the survivability scale, a designation reserved for worlds so hostile they bred lifeforms capable of thriving in constant adversity. Even the strongest consortium species found themselves wary around humans, who seemed capable of defying expectations with alarming regularity. "Human," Garvax said, his voice a low, resonant hiss as he approached her. His mandibles clicked together for emphasis. "You are aware that this facility was built to break recruits like you?" Riley stopped and turned, looking up at him with a grin that bordered on cocky. "Break me? I thought the whole point was to train me." Garvax's antennae twitched, a sign of irritation among his species. He loomed closer, the dull light reflecting off his chitinous plates. "You will not find this course amusing, I assure you. Many recruits fail. Those who succeed often wish they hadn't. You may find your Deathworld reputation means little here." Riley tilted her head, the grin never wavering. "Guess we'll find out, won't we?" The exchange didn't go unnoticed. A few of the recruits whispered among themselves, their voices carrying a mixture of fear and curiosity. Riley turned her attention back to the lineup. Her posture relaxed as Garvax moved away, muttering to himself about arrogant softskins. The Karnak Tactical Resilience course had a reputation for breaking even the most disciplined recruits. Designed to simulate the chaos of real warfare, it was the consortium's ultimate test of a soldier's adaptability, endurance, and mental fortitude. It combined grueling obstacle courses, live-fire combat scenarios, and survival challenges, all while pushing recruits to the limits of their physical and psychological capabilities. It was a week-long gauntlet that most barely survived, and those who did carried the scars, mental and physical, for life. The first test began in the sprawling simulation chamber, a massive labyrinth of trenches, barriers, and automated drones programmed to attack on sight. Recruits were tasked with surviving for 2 hours while completing objectives scattered across the battlefield. The simulation room's walls shimmered as holographic terrain shifted into place, transforming the sterile interior into a chaotic war zone. Garvax stood in the control center, watching the recruits through an array of monitors as they prepared to enter the simulation. "Mark this down," he said to his second-in-command, a reptilian Zerkala. "The human will crack within 30 minutes. The signal to begin blared and the recruits launched themselves into the fray. Chaos erupted immediately as the drones opened fire, their energy rounds leaving scorch marks on the terrain and sending several recruits diving for cover. Riley moved differently. Where others hesitated, she sprinted forward, weaving through the barrage with uncanny precision. She ducked under a hail of fire, vaulted over a trench wall, and neutralized a drone with a single well-placed shot to its sensor array. Gavax leaned forward, his compound eyes narrowing. Interesting. Riley didn't stop. She moved through the course with a fluidity that seemed almost choreographed, dismantling objectives with an efficiency that left the instructors in stunned silence. Where recruits typically struggled to maintain focus under the relentless pressure, Riley seemed to thrive. She anticipated the drone's movements as if she could see their programming, bypassed traps with minimal effort, and completed objectives so quickly that the system flagged her for potential anomalies. "Is this some kind of malfunction?" Zirkala asked, her forked tongue flicking nervously as she reviewed the data feed. "She's completing objectives at a rate statistically improbable," Garvax hissed. "There are no malfunctions in my simulations." The simulation ended long before the 2-hour mark. While most recruits stumbled out, bruised and exhausted, Riley stood near the exit, rolling her shoulders and looking faintly disappointed. Garvax stormed down from the control room to confront her, his heavy footsteps echoing across the chamber. "You," he barked, mandibles clicking, "explain yourself." "Explain what?" Riley asked, blinking innocently. "You completed the course in 37 minutes, he snarled. "This is supposed to be a 2-hour test. You trivialized it." She shrugged. "Wasn't that hard?" The words hit Garvax like a physical blow. He loomed over her, his antennae twitching violently. "This course is designed to push recruits beyond their limits. It is not meant to be easy." "Maybe you need to raise the bar, Sergeant," Riley replied with a smirk. "Or maybe humans are just better at this than you expected." Garvax's mandibles clamped shut with an audible snap. He turned sharply, his chitinous plates rattling as he stomped away. Riley watched him go, her grin widening. The panic among the instructors began to spread. Riley's performance was just the beginning. Over the next several hours, she moved through the rest of the day's exercises with the same unsettling ease. The obstacle course, a grueling combination of electrified walls, gravity-shifting chambers, and zero-gravity segments, was supposed to take 4 hours to complete. Riley finished in 22 minutes, barely breaking a sweat. In a survival simulation designed to test recruits' endurance in harsh desert conditions, she hacked a scavenged drone to carry supplies, turning what should have been a 3-day ordeal into a leisurely stroll. The instructors convened in the staff quarters that evening, their bioluminescent data displays flickering with confusion. Garvax stood at the head of the table, his claws tapping against the metal surface in agitation. "This is unacceptable," he growled. "The human is disrupting the entire training structure." "It's not just her speed," Zirkala said, her slitted eyes fixed on the data. "The way she anticipates challenges. It's as if she's already experienced the simulations." Tilvos, the Luminar psychological specialist, interjected. "Her mental profile is unlike anything I've seen. Humans are known for their adaptability, but this goes beyond that. Her brain activity suggests she's not experiencing stress the way recruits typically do. If anything, she's enjoying herself." Garvax's mandibles flared in frustration. "This course is meant to be a crucible, a test of resilience. If one human can trivialize it, what happens when more of them join?" Tilvos hesitated, his bioluminescent markings dimming in thought. "We may need to reconsider how we evaluate Deathworlders. The methods that work for other species may not apply to them." Garvax slammed a clawed fist onto the table. "We will not allow one species to undermine centuries of tradition. If she wants a challenge, she will get one." In her quarters, Riley lay on her bunk, flipping through the course handbook. She yawned, her muscles pleasantly sore from the day's activities. For all the hype about Ankra Prime's training program, she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. The consortium's idea of grueling didn't seem all that different from a good workout back home. She chuckled to herself. If this is their best, the galaxy's in for a rude awakening. The next morning, the recruits assembled in the pre-dawn gloom, the faint light of Ankra Prime's artificial atmosphere casting long shadows over the cracked black stone of the parade grounds. The air was sharp and thin, forcing many to breathe in heavy gulps. For the non-Deathworlders, just standing in formation was an exercise in willpower. Yet Riley stood straight and unbothered, her posture relaxed, her eyes scanning the horizon as if she had all the time in the world. Garvax was already there, towering over the group, his armor-like exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. His antennae twitched as he stared at Riley. It was as if her calm demeanor was a personal insult, a defiance he couldn't tolerate. Around him, the other recruits fidgeted, clearly anxious under his scrutiny. But Riley didn't flinch. She offered him the same infuriating grin she'd given him the day before, and it made his mandibles clench involuntarily. "Today," Garvax growled, his voice echoing across the field, "you will face the Karnak Advanced Tactical Drill, a live-fire scenario designed to test your ability to function under extreme pressure. Many recruits have failed. Some permanently." His multifaceted eyes locked onto Riley. "This is where arrogance meets its limits." The recruits were herded into the armory where each was issued a standard consortium battle kit, a lightweight combat suit, a stun rifle, and a limited supply of ammunition. Riley inspected the gear with a faintly bemused expression, flipping the rifle over in her hands. It wasn't primitive exactly, but it lacked the elegance and efficiency she was used to from her own people's designs. She adjusted a few settings on the rifle, tweaking the power distribution as the other recruits watched her nervously. "Do you even know what you're doing?" a Corvan recruit asked, his voice trembling slightly. Riley glanced at him with a shrug. "Yeah, I've seen systems like this before, just needs a little optimization." The Corvan muttered something under his breath and turned away, clearly unnerved. Riley didn't mind. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to prove a point. Though, if she was being honest, it was starting to feel more like a game. The more the consortium tried to push her, the more fun it became to see just how far she could go. Once everyone was suited up, the recruits were loaded into a massive transport vehicle that rumbled across the rocky terrain toward the drill site. The ride was rough, and the recruits held on to whatever they could as the vehicle jolted and swayed. Riley sat near the back, one leg crossed over the other, her rifle resting casually against her shoulder. She caught Garvax watching her from the front of the cabin, his antennae twitching as if he were trying to decipher some hidden code in her behavior. The transport ground to a halt, and the recruits were herded out into a vast, barren expanse dotted with jagged rocks and artificial structures. Drones buzzed in the distance, their metallic forms glinting in the weak light. The air was heavy with the hum of energy fields and the faint crackle of static from hidden weapons emplacements. This wasn't just a test of endurance, it was a battlefield simulation designed to emulate the chaos of a real war zone. Every recruit would be on their own, with only their wits and their training to guide them. Garvax addressed them one last time before the exercise began. "Your objective is to retrieve 3 data cores from designated locations and return them to the extraction point. You will face hostile drones, environmental hazards, and each other. Only those who complete the objective will pass. The rest will be dealt with appropriately." The recruits glanced at each other uneasily. The idea of competing against their fellow cadets added a layer of tension that was palpable even in the thin air. Riley, however, just adjusted the straps on her gear and gave her rifle one last inspection. She was already calculating the most efficient route through the course, mentally mapping out strategies for neutralizing obstacles and avoiding unnecessary conflict. It was second nature to her, the kind of thinking that had been drilled into every human since childhood. On Earth, survival wasn't just a skill, it was a way of life. The starting signal blared, and the recruits scattered in all directions. Riley didn't sprint like the others. She moved at a steady, deliberate pace, her eyes scanning the terrain for threats. Within moments, the battlefield came alive with the sound of gunfire and explosions as drones engaged the recruits. The sky filled with flashes of energy rounds and the sharp crack of rifles, and already a few recruits were shouting in panic as they were pinned down by suppressive fire. Riley spotted a group of drones ahead, their sleek forms hovering low to the ground as they patrolled a narrow canyon. She crouched behind a boulder, taking a moment to assess their movements. They were moving in a predictable pattern, their sensors sweeping back and forth in rhythmic intervals. It wasn't hard to find the gaps in their coverage. With a practiced hand, she adjusted the settings on her rifle, then leaned out and fired a precise shot that hit the lead drone square in its optical sensor. The drone dropped with a crackle of electricity, and the others immediately shifted their attention to her position. Riley didn't wait for them to retaliate. She was already moving, darting from cover to cover as the drones opened fire. Energy rounds sizzled past her, scorching the rocks around her, but she stayed one step ahead, her movements fluid and unpredictable. She took out the remaining drones with a combination of well-placed shots and clever use of the terrain, using the canyon walls to funnel them into vulnerable positions. By the time the area was clear, she had already located the first data core. It was housed in a cylindrical container embedded in the canyon wall, guarded by a secondary security system that would have taken most recruits several minutes to bypass. Riley cracked it open in less than 30 seconds, her fingers flying over the controls with the ease of someone who'd been doing this sort of thing her entire life. She extracted the core, secured it in her pack, and moved on without a second thought. Elsewhere on the battlefield, the other recruits were struggling. The drones were relentless, their programming designed to exploit weaknesses and overwhelm the unprepared. Some recruits had formed makeshift alliances, but these rarely lasted long under the pressure of the simulation. Betrayals were common, and more than one recruit found themselves stunned and left behind by those they'd trusted. Garvax watched it all unfold from the control center, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction as he monitored the chaos. This was how the course was supposed to go. Recruits pushed to their limits, forced to make hard decisions in the face of overwhelming adversity. Yet, no matter how much he tried to focus on the others, his gaze kept drifting back to the human. Riley was an anomaly. She moved through the battlefield like a specter, avoiding unnecessary fights and dispatching drones with precision when confrontation was unavoidable. She retrieved the second data core with the same efficiency as the first, bypassing security measures that should have stalled her for minutes, if not hours. What was supposed to be a grueling test of endurance and resourcefulness seemed almost trivial to her, and it was driving Garvax mad. "Her vitals are stable," Tilvos reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. "No signs of elevated stress levels. She's not even winded." Garvax slammed a clawed fist onto the console. "She's mocking us. This is not training, this is sport to her." Zerkala, who had been monitoring the other recruits, hesitated before speaking. "Sir, it's not just her. The others, they're starting to notice. Her performance is affecting morale." Garvax's antennae twitched violently. "Explain." "She's making it look easy," Zerkala said. "The other recruits see her, and it's demoralizing. They're struggling just to survive, and she's thriving." Garvax growled deep in his thorax, his frustration mounting. "Increase the difficulty. Deploy the advanced drones." "Sir, that's not protocol." "Do it," Garvax snapped, his mandibles flaring. "Let's see how the human handles a real challenge." Back on the battlefield, Riley had just secured the third data core when she noticed the shift. The hum of the drones changed, growing deeper and more menacing, and a new sound filled the air, the sharp mechanical whir of heavy-class combat units. She turned toward the source and spotted them in the distance, a squad of advanced drones, their angular forms bristling with weapons and reinforced armor. Riley's grin returned. "Finally," she muttered to herself, "something interesting." The advanced drones moved with purpose, their heavy frames humming with an ominous power. Unlike the smaller patrol drones, which followed predictable paths and used basic attack patterns, these were smarter, faster, and deadlier. They had modular weapon systems that could adapt to threats on the fly, and their armor was designed to withstand energy blasts and kinetic impacts alike. They weren't just obstacles. They were hunters, and they were converging on Riley's location with ruthless efficiency. Riley crouched behind a rocky outcropping, her heartbeat steady as she assessed the situation. She counted 5 drones in the squad, their formation tight as they scanned the area with multi-spectrum sensors. They were triangulating her position, and she knew it wouldn't take them long to zero in. She took a deep breath and let her mind shift into that calm, focused state she'd learned to tap into during her years of training back on Earth. This wasn't the time for hesitation or second-guessing. She glanced at her rifle. The consortium-issued weapon wasn't designed for this kind of confrontation, but Riley had already modified it during the initial armory setup. A quick adjustment to the power output and targeting algorithms gave her an edge most recruits wouldn't have thought to exploit. It wouldn't be enough to take out the drones outright, but it would buy her the time she needed to execute a plan. The first drone crested the ridge, its sensor array glowing faintly as it locked onto her position. It fired without hesitation, an energy bolt sizzling through the air and slamming into the rock mere inches from her head. Riley rolled to the side, coming up in a crouch and returning fire. Her shot hit the drone's sensor node, temporarily scrambling its targeting system. The machine staggered, its weapons jerking erratically as it tried to recalibrate. Riley didn't wait for it to recover. She sprinted toward the nearest cluster of boulders, weaving through the uneven terrain as the other drones opened fire. Energy blasts streaked past her, close enough that she could feel the heat on her skin. She dove behind cover, taking a moment to catch her breath and evaluate her options. The drones were spreading out, attempting to flank her, and their coordination was unnervingly precise. She needed to change the game. Reaching into her pack, she retrieved a small device she'd salvaged from one of the earlier drones she'd taken down. It was a signal disruptor, designed to interfere with the drone's communication systems. She'd reprogrammed it on the fly, modifying its range and power output to create a makeshift EMP. It wouldn't disable the drones entirely, but it could give her a critical window of opportunity. She activated the device and tossed it over the boulder. The instant it hit the ground, it emitted a high-pitched whine, followed by a burst of electromagnetic energy that rippled through the area. The effect was immediate. The drones froze mid-movement, their systems momentarily overwhelmed by the disruption. Riley didn't waste the opportunity. She vaulted over the boulder and fired a series of precision shots, targeting the drone's exposed joints and power cores. 2 of the machines went down in a shower of sparks, their shattered frames collapsing to the ground. The remaining 3 recovered quickly, their systems adapting to the disruption as they resumed their advance. Riley cursed under her breath. The disruptor had been a one-time use, and now she was out of tricks. She ducked behind another rock as the drones opened fire, their energy blasts carving deep gouges into the ground around her. In the control center, Garvax watched the confrontation with a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. The human wasn't just surviving. She was adapting, improvising in ways that no recruit had ever managed before. Even the advanced drones, which were designed to challenge elite consortium soldiers, were struggling to keep up with her. "She's toying with them," Tilva said, his bioluminescent markings pulsing in astonishment. "She's using tactics I've never seen in any simulation." "She's reckless," Zirkala muttered, though there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. That kind of improvisation could just as easily get her killed. "Reckless or not," Garvax growled, "she's still standing, but she won't last much longer. Increase the drone's aggression protocols." "Sir, at this rate—" "Do it," Garvax snapped, slamming a clawed fist onto the console. "I will not have a single recruit undermine the integrity of this program." On the battlefield, Riley felt the shift almost immediately. The drones' movements became faster, their attacks more relentless. They were no longer just trying to neutralize her, they were trying to overwhelm her. Energy blasts rained down around her, forcing her to stay in constant motion. She darted between cover, her mind racing as she searched for an opening. Her chance came when one of the drones overextended, pushing too far ahead of its squad in its eagerness to close the distance. Riley seized the opportunity, sprinting toward it with her rifle raised. The machine turned to face her, its weapons charging for a point-blank shot. But Riley was faster. She slid under its legs, firing upward as she passed beneath it. The shot hit its power core, and the drone exploded in a blinding flash of light and heat. The force of the blast knocked Riley off her feet, sending her skidding across the ground. Her ears rang, and her vision blurred for a moment, but she forced herself to get up. There was no time to recover, not with the remaining drones bearing down on her. She stumbled to her feet, her rifle clutched tightly in her hands, and turned to face her pursuers. Before the drones could close in, a new sound filled the air, a deep, resonant hum that sent a shiver down Riley's spine. She glanced upward and saw a consortium dropship descending from the sky, its sleek hull gleaming in the artificial light. The drones hesitated, their targeting systems momentarily disrivaled by the ship's arrival. The dropship landed in a cloud of dust, and a squad of armored figures emerged, their weapons trained on the drones. The newcomers moved with precision, their rifles spitting bursts of energy that cut down the remaining machines with ruthless efficiency. Within moments, the battlefield was silent, the smoking remains of the drones scattered across the ground. Riley stood frozen, her rifle still raised as she tried to process what had just happened. One of the armored figures approached her, removing their helmet to reveal the familiar face of Garvax. His compound eyes glinted with a mixture of anger and something else she couldn't quite place. "Human," he growled, his mandibles clicking as he stepped closer. "You've caused quite a stir." Riley lowered her rifle, her expression calm despite the tension in the air. "Wasn't my intention. I just did what I had to do."